Okay, now on. So we're recording everything, and so the first thing I wanted to do is cover an overview of Drupal. Sounded like almost everyone had experience with Dreamweaver. Um, Drupal is not Dreamweaver, and so and there are good, there are good things about that, and the biggest most important thing is Drupal is tied to a database where Dreamweaver, everything you build out is static and you can't create any relationships. If you ever have to like create a blog or something, you'd have to do a ton of manual steps, where Drupal is an actual content management system which is tied to a database, so you can use content in different places like a teaser. You can create what we call views, and some of these terms are going to be unfamiliar, but once we get into the site, I'll show you what I mean by like a teaser and a view and what they actually mean. But the important thing is you're going to be able to create content, and that content can be shared throughout the site. And things like the menu can be dynamic, where a menu in Dreamweaver, like there are ways to like do includes, and you can include that one change throughout the site, but it's not dynamic. Where in Drupal, it's actually dynamic, where you have the ability to drag and drop things and resort things with an interface that's super easy, rather than trying to hard code everything in Dreamweaver, which it can be challenging, it can be time consuming, and the whole concept of Drupal is we want you to be able to the concept of what we're trying to do here is get you comfortable with managing the site's content. I'm not expecting anyone to leave here as an expert in Drupal and or web development or web design or anything like that. I want you to be comfortable going in, logging in, finding your content that you want to change or create, go in and get out, because this isn't most often your job for the whole entire day. You want to just go in and change something and get it out quickly. I don't want it to be an experience where you're trying to learn it every single time you get into it. So this is why we're doing this training session. So you'll be super comfortable with Drupal and how it works, and be able to find what you're trying to do quickly. But Drupal is an open source content management system. There are no licenses, and someone mentioned that like for Adobe's very into their licensing, but that's how they make money. Drupal is an organization, a nonprofit organization that has key members that are in charge of Drupal core. And so Drupal core is out of the box when you go to Drupal site. So if you go to drupal.org, this is their main site. If you ever want to learn a bit more about Drupal, this would be a good place to go. And you can go in, you can read about documentation, you can get help about information about the community. They have a ton of different resources on this site, but you can go in and you can download Drupal. If you wanted to, you could download Drupal tonight if you ever wanted to. I don't expect anyone to do so. And so you can get Drupal here. It's completely free, no licenses, no catches, and it's basically how Drupal is powered is on the shoulder of all of these amazing developers, and they are funded by the community. And when I say the community, I mean global community, where you have like the U.S. government, Australia, BBC, like big organizations, weather.com, all these companies, their site is powered by Drupal. So for them to advance and to have a stable environment on Drupal, they contribute back. And they don't get paid by contributing back. This is just how Drupal works, by the efforts of the community. So when there is, for example, a security patch, uh, bless you, it's either done by the Drupal organization, or can be found by the community and reported back to the main Drupal team. But when there is a security update, it will be announced on your website, but also on Drupal.org site. And so when there is an update, you can go in, you can update your site, and it can be secure again. But it's since it is open source, that is something that needs to be taken care of continually. Where like if you used a product from Adobe, they would be in charge of maintaining it, but then you would pay large licensing fees. And I'm not talking about Dreamweaver. Dreamweaver is like not even really a content management system. It's more just an editor, a really nice editor. But as far as content management systems go, Adobe has I can't remember what it's called, but it has a very expensive one that they maintain the security, but you pay a very expensive licensing fee for each entire site. But with Drupal, you don't have to pay those licensing fees, but you are in charge of maintaining your own site. So there's costs to that freedom of having an open source CMS. I don't know if any of you have heard of WordPress. I'm assuming more of you have probably heard of WordPress and Drupal, but they share a very, common platform as far as like being open source. They aren't powered by the same code or anything other than they both are PHP driven. But these are things that are very technical, and again, I don't expect you to really have to understand all the ins and outs of how the code behind the scene works. But that's kind of in a nutshell Drupal. Drupal's used from small sites. I've built personally hundreds of sites, as small as landscaper sites, as big as the USDA New Farmers site was, I think, the biggest outreaching site that they say it's their second most popular one on their that they have on all of their platforms. So for Drupal, but Drupal's used all over the place and is very, very powerful. But does anyone have any questions about Drupal so far? Nope. Okay. So biggest thing is Drupal is not Dreamweaver. So you're not going to have to open up, your file and start viewing all the code and trying to figure out where it goes. Does anyone know what a WYSIWYG is? What you see is what you get editor. That's pretty much the closest you're going to get to the code. And the reason is because just to make that super easy connection to your content, you're going to be able to format your content, hit save, and be done. But that's, I'll get to that when we get there. So that's Drupal. And so Drupal is what powers your site, but also Drupal has a ton, like hundreds, I think, thousands of modules out there, and pretty much every single module out there. And I'll go to so this is where you would find modules. This is really, you get Drupal core, which is kind of like the engine behind the scenes, but really what kind of powers all the like individual functionality of your site are these modules. And the nice thing is you're using a platform that's extremely extendable. So out of the box, what you're getting isn't something that you're going to be limited to. So again, not like if you purchased an Adobe CMS, you're limited to whatever they provide. Drupal has tons of opportunity for you to build whatever you want. And we've worked with your team on trying to get a very nice type package that is extendable as well. Okay.
Yeah, just a couple notes on that security stuff he's talking about. That'll all be done at the national level. That's not something you're going to have to worry
Yeah.
about. That'll be the Orions of the world doing those software updates, the Drupal module updates, keeping everything current.
Right. Yeah, I don't want to scare you that you're going to be having to maintain the security for that. It's just that it is, since it is open source, you will like someone will have to maintain the security and should maintain the security for your site. But the nice thing is Ryan's not developing the patches for this. You have a team, global team that's responsible for the security. He just gets the patch and then he patches your site. So it's hardly any work for him, but he's the one that's going to be in charge of doing that, not you guys. You're just going to be maintaining content.
And the other piece that I think Brent has talked on that will be important is the core site we stand up through this initial process will be just that, you know, kind of a core, basic, NIC, geographic area, third tier sites. And then there will be environment in which the geographic areas, the third tier centers can do, you know, some module development, some development outside of the live program, you know, to play with, to see what you come up with, you know, to be innovative. You know, there's that opportunity out there for folks to take this where they want to take it. And so there'll be that test environment able to do that. That what you're trying to do will work and mesh with the site and everything else that's going on. And then when Mr. Tippett's, Ryan, and the IT folks are satisfied that A, it's functional, B, it's not gonna corrupt or cause any issues with the larger system, you know, that'll be brought on live in an individual instant. Let's say southern area, Calvin develops some great aircraft tool and stands it up and develops it, we put it live, and the folks in the rest of the country are like, that is the smartest thing I've ever seen, you know, we want to do that. We can then duplicate that across the landscape very easily so that everybody has that tool. And so again, you know, this will be a core kind of functionality we're going to start with, but as Brett's alluded to, the sky's the limit. You know, there's a ton of innovation out there and available should people choose to go those directions.
Okay, cool. Yeah, exactly. And so that's what we're going to be looking at today is that base setup. But yeah, there is no limitation to Drupal. I've seen the most basic sites built with Drupal and the most complicated sites, and it's just whatever you guys are needing to do. There is a way in Drupal to do it. I have a ton of faith in what you guys can do with extending Drupal, that it will fit exactly what you want because of how powerful it is. Okay, so again, Drupal modules, these are like the little bits and pieces that extend Drupal, that make it very powerful, and for all the little requirements. The differences between, if you have heard of WordPress versus Drupal, Drupal is more built in smaller molecules of functionality, where WordPress has these big plugins that can do a ton of functionality, but have a ton of assumptions as well, where Drupal modules are broken down to very small tasks. And then the nice thing is, it takes a little bit more effort to set things up, but then you can tailor it exactly the way you want it, not the developer wants it. So to me, that's like one of the biggest advantages of Drupal versus WordPress. But really, I mean, in the end, they all kind of do about the same thing. But Drupal is more seen as a framework versus WordPress is more of just a really nice blog CMS. Okay, so these are where all the modules are. Another thing I wanted to highlight is we are using Drupal 8. So this is the latest and greatest that Drupal has developed, and Drupal 7 is an older framework and is still supported, but we chose to use Drupal 8 because you'll have a longer lifespan with your site, and you can continually update it and maintain it for a lot longer than if we built it with Drupal 7. And this is the latest. There is no like public version of Drupal 9, so this is the newest version. And I guess one thing I forgot. Go ahead.
So you said that it'll last longer. Is it not retroactively compatible?
No.
If you build your site in Drupal 8, when they come out with Drupal 9, you have to start all over again?
They have talked about it. They haven't decided how they're going to do that. What they've done versus what they've done in the past with Drupal 7 is they've shortened the lifespan or shortened the time between updates. So core updates, they're doing it faster and iterating faster with coming out with newer features. But they haven't said exactly how Drupal 9 is going to work with Drupal 8, but most often it's not backwards compatible, and the reason is that limits you to old technology. It's and really I've been doing web development since the late 90s and I worked with a ton of different clients, but the biggest thing is sites don't last forever. Like, sites have a lifespan, and most sites, like, you're looking at I would say 4 to 6 years with the technology that we're building on it now. Like, just go back like 5 years. No one wants to build on that old of technology. One, because if you did, it would limit your server's environment. And so you'd be running on old PHP that would be insecure, like be vulnerable to attacks. And so you're limiting your architecture by saying that it's backwards compatible. And that's why I think most often Drupal wants to push it so they're not having everyone be on this old, out-of-date technology. That it is nice that you can just, like, WordPress has some of that where it's backwards compatible. But then again, it's also created a ton of insecure sites with very old server architecture. Because the other thing about security, it's not about just Drupal and their modules that need to be updated, but your server architecture too. Wherever your site's sitting on, the server, which Ryan's built for you guys, which is using that, like, awesome technology and latest, that needs to be maintained as well, which he is doing. But as far as security goes, that's one other component. And so if you have old architecture, you're going to have old server, like older versions of PHP to run it, which isn't the best. So to answer your question very shortly, no, it's probably not. Just because they don't want people running on out-of-date server technology. They want people to be using the latest, because if the other reason too is it's going to limit what they can do as far as development, as far as how great Drupal 9 can be. If they have to develop it so it works with older technology, it won't be as great as a CMS.
So the whole intent behind this was to choose an entire enterprise level system that was going to solve the wild west of web design, what we had going on right now, which had been in place for 15 years. This is going to be, 2018, 18 years. So this is a enterprise level solution. It's going to be, not as flexible as what we had before, but it's going to be longer lasting, in that when 9 does come out, we'll be able to all roll to 9 when that becomes possible. And that 8 will have a long lasting, 5-10 years.
Yeah. And migration, the biggest thing is what they're working on are migration tools. So you can just say, these are my, what in Drupal, and we'll cover this, what my content types, like how you organize content isn't everything's a generic page. It's a form specific for the content that you're trying to create. And so in Drupal 8, they have great tools to migrate 6 and 7 sites to 8, and they're even doing a better job at making sure that 9 is going to be a more seamless transition between 8 and 9. But yeah, it's how the web is. But yeah, this is more of an enterprise level CMS. This is a CMS, where Dreamweaver really isn't a CMS. It's a very, very good editor tool, but doesn't have, it's not a system. It doesn't have any database tied to it, but it is a nice way to, like, edit pages. But it kind of allows to lead to unstructured pages that can be broken, and this will help. A content management system like Drupal will help the continuity between all your sites. And that, to me, really, that's the biggest, most important thing is your visitors. Like, yes, we want to make sure this is as easy as possible for you to edit, but your visitors' experience needs to be enhanced as well. Looking at your current sites, we really want to make sure that they have a very good experience on trying to find content and exactly, know what they're looking for. Right off the bat, be able to get to it, where, if you don't have a very organized tool and, things are different on every single GACC site, it's going to be harder for people to find content. So this will lead to improve that structure.
So, and Brent touched on one of the main reasons why we're here is because we need to kind of go back and realize that these sites are set up for operations personnel. And public is going to be a secondary, but these are really operation-centered sites and interagency operations at that. So it's that, remember, our audience are the fire personnel that we serve in an interagency environment.
Yep. Okay. And yeah, so I didn't say exactly who your visitor will be, but yeah, the types of visitors you'll be getting, we want to make sure they have the best experience and be able to use your site as easily as possible. Okay, so we've covered kind of an introduction to Drupal. Does anyone have any last questions about Drupal? Okay. Before we move on to user accounts, let's actually tour the sites. I think that would be kind of important before we actually start looking at the back end of how all these sites work. Let's look at the front end. Would it be helpful if I stopped the video and kind of like chaptered this? Does anyone ever think? Okay. I'm gonna just stop this.